The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the first day of this Rohatsu Sesshin here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico. Rohatsu is the traditional big of the big sesshins in the world of Buddhism. And as such, there are many, many groups that are sitting Rohatsu Sesshin right now. The sesshin is traditionally 8 days, with the last, depends on the temple, the last 3 days are spent sitting all night long. Hence, it goes into the 8th day, as the Buddha did when he had his great awakening, and that's the model that we follow. The sesshin ends the morning of the 8th day after or with a ceremony, a special ceremony. And in the meantime, we pull out all the stops to deepen our practice immeasurably. When we realize that we really can't trust our thoughts, we're way ahead of the game. So if we can't trust our thoughts, then how can we navigate? Well, there's a book. It's called Wayfinding. It's by M.R. O'Connor. And there's a quote in here by a Hawaiian, a very famous Hawaiian, Nainoa Thompson, and extremely well-known, traditional Hawaiian navigator. He had lost track of all his usual ways of navigating in the middle of the open ocean. Cloudy skies, the ocean was too choppy because of the high winds for him to read, so to speak, the ocean. And initially he got panicked. And then he realized that he could feel the moon. He could feel the moon and its position, and deduced where he was. And he says, that night, I learned there are levels of navigation that are realms of the spirit. Hawaiians call it na'au, knowing through your instinct, your feelings, rather than your mind or intellect. It's like doors open, doors of knowledge, and you learn something new. But before the doors open, you don't even know that such knowing exists. But I dare say that small children do know. This is the same sense or ability to sense that we all have, and that is so important in deepening our Zen practice. We can never think our way to awakening. We can never think our way to the innate freedom that is there in all of us. We have to tune in, as this man did, to something beyond ordinary knowledge, beyond our usual eye, ear, nose sense, and tune into our body. When we can do that, if it's a moonless night in the forest, and we stayed a little longer than we were planning to, as happened to one of the students here, he and another friend had gone far in, and They literally couldn't see anything. Yet they were able to return to their vehicle. They were in quite a few miles, and so it took time. And they did it without bumping into any trees, without falling into the creek, without tripping over logs or losing their way. And you can say, well, of course, they followed the creek. But that's not the whole story. There was something more than that they were sensing. And they got back safely, and now we know the story. When we do the extended breath, deeply forgetting ourselves, it's almost as if every cell in our body tingles with a reaching out and a sensing. It's very important to learn to tune into that, because not only will it help your zazen, it will also help you in your life in general. So how? Well, we are well trained in using our intellect to navigate life, but it leaves us stranded many times. It leads us into bad places many times. It leads us into blind alleys. It's not 100% helpful. And unfortunately, with so many navigation tools that we have now, our maps on our cell phones, our GPS gizmos, we tend to let go of even the sense of how to find our way just by looking at signs or giving a sense of, for example, if you're in Colorado, do you head toward the mountains or do you head away from the mountains? And if the mountains are on your left side, you're going north, I think it is. If the mountains are on your right side, you're going south. People in the West have long navigated that way, but that's still a level of superficial navigation. Tuning in to your full body experience of breathing out over and over and over again with a perplexity, a sense of there is something beyond. Because as Nainoa Thompson recognized, there's a different, deeper way of understanding. There's a different, deeper way of knowing. There's a different, deeper way of finding your way. And that means interior way, as in practice, or through the woods at a dark night. And there is a koan about this. It helps you cross the river when the bridge is broken down. On a moonless night, it leads you back to the village. When we become too dependent on our mechanical or technological toys, we lose even the level of understanding that we had when we were little. So it's very, very important to train yourself to do that non-intellectual sensing. As another Zen teacher that I'm good friends with, who practices at night, going out without a flashlight, finding her way around through sensing. There's something that many blind people have, especially people who are blind from birth. There was a study in which boxes and other obstacles were placed in different places in a hallway. And then different people who were sightless were asked to walk down the hallway. And the investigators were quite surprised when one man quickly walked down the hallway, avoiding every single obstacle. And these were, cardboard boxes that were placed here and there. There was not any pattern to it. And then there's the man who was filmed riding a bicycle, totally blind. He had a different way of finding his way. It was, in essence, through radar. He would click, which he started doing as an infant. And when his parents asked the teacher when he started to going to school to go ahead and let him click, and she allowed it, then he was able to navigate easily. And of course, he learned how to ride a bike. There's many, many more things we can do when we don't, in essence, stop ourselves because of assumptions. I can't do it. That's really not necessarily true. There are amazing stories about people who have suddenly had misfortunes. I think of the man who, at the age of 10, had polio and ended up in an iron lung. So now he's in his 70s, cheerful, happy, having had a full career as a lawyer. Somehow he was able to go to university and then to law school. I don't know how he did it in an iron lung, particularly since this was before they had any online courses, for example. But he did, and his joy was palpable. The only challenge he's finding now is that because he's been in this iron lung for so many years, and it breaks down periodically. He can be out of the iron lung for 20 minutes, but not longer than that. And so somehow he's connected with an engineer who enjoys putting his iron lung back together again. They found another iron lung, one other iron lung that the engineer scavenges from to keep his own iron lung going. There's so many stories of people that, as I said, they're not what we would call normally endowed, but they manage to do amazing things. Now, this is still a little bit of a side story. To be able to be out in the middle of the ocean with no way of navigating. The skies are cloudy, so you can't see the moon. You can't see the stars, which is a classic way of navigating in open ocean. You can't read the ocean, which is another way people who are river runners, for example, or kayakers, read the water. They read the energy of the water. And he couldn't even do that because the waves were so high, because the wind was so strong. And yet, he suddenly realized that he could feel the moon and feel its position, which then he was able to guide himself by. Perhaps this is the way that it's known that Polynesians had, centuries ago, had crossed from Polynesia to South America, for example, hundreds of thousands of miles on open ocean. But somehow they did it and got back too, through this intuitive sense. Now, there's versions of intuition, and we have to be careful about that, because intuition of the intuition light, we could call it, L-I-T-E, is driven by our ideas and our desires. So we can feel like we really want to do this, but it's not accurate because it's really our self-image that is driving that. But there's another sense, and here I think about the man who was dozing in the front seat of his car. It was late at night, and his wife was driving, and she came up to a stoplight, and he sort of briefly aroused himself just to say, don't start up right away. He wasn't checking out things, obviously, but he sensed something. And she went by what he said, and had she started to accelerate and move through the intersection, they would have been T-boned, as it's called, because a car ran a red light almost immediately. But if she had just simply been, it's nighttime, I'm just interested in getting home, and you stop at a stoplight, and when it turns green, you go. Well, I hope everybody doesn't do that, because you have to double check what's going on around you, which unfortunately so many drivers don't do these days. I was stopped at a traffic light in Albuquerque years ago, and there was another car with a woman in it in the left turn lane, and thankfully I was in my old truck. All of a sudden, this car flew between us, knocked the mirror on the truck askew, and made a quick left turn without rolling. I don't know how. Obviously, the guy was speeding. I don't know whether he was avoiding something, whether he's being chased, or whether he was just not paying attention and didn't see that the light was changing. And the only thing he could do was, perhaps he was going to do it anyway, was turn left. But the woman in the other vehicle and I looked at each other and raised our eyebrows. It's amazing that he was able to maneuver between these two vehicles, which were adjacent to each other and two adjacent lanes. But he did. And all he did is whack the mirror. The mirrors on those trucks were wide mirrors because Will and Lucy, who gave me the truck many, many years later, after they had used it originally to move from Chicago hauling a trailer. And so they had to have the wide mirrors to do that. So it's absolutely vital. This is the most important tool to develop in terms of our life and our Zen practice, is that tuning in to a deep level beyond our desires, beyond our assumptions about ourselves, so that it's a pure tuning in to something that is real and not flavored by our conditioning. As we do that, and it takes time to develop that, we'll find ourselves much more able to do the practice. And also, as I said earlier, much more able to live life in a more free way. Because if we're always tied to our intellect, it's like we're, let me think, okay. When I was living in Thailand, traveling at one point through the jungle, and there was an elephant, a working elephant, but he was not working at that point in time. He was in the forest, and he was chained, so he was hobbled. It was a fairly long chain, but it must have been quite a chain too, because those animals are quite strong. It's like that. We hobble ourselves if we depend entirely on our intellect. Even studying, even reading, learning some subject matter depends on intuition. That subtle understanding. I remember when I was in Thai language class at the Foreign Service Institute, because we were going to be going to Thailand next, and they expected that we would be in remote areas. So I had 5 months of what was supposedly half time, which means about 5 hours a day, every day except the weekend, of language. And you didn't start with a book. In fact, there was no book, period. You walked in, there were about 5 of us in the class, and there was a Thai woman who looked at us and started talking in Thai. And we just had to figure it out. And that's how children learn languages too. They have a sense, they begin to get a sense of what's being said. Some of it is body language. There wasn't much body language in that class. There was a pencil on the table. I don't remember that there was anything else, actually. And she just started asking us questions. It was quite an exercise in Zen practice, I have to say, because if you're trying to be an accomplished person and suddenly you're stuck in a class where you're being given nonsense syllables, which is what language is initially, it can kind of impact your self-image. You can get embarrassed, you can get concerned, you can feel awkward, you can feel like you're a failure. I mean, all these things come up for people, but there we were, and it was relentless, but we learned a great deal of the language that way. So there are many, many examples of this, using this deeper understanding, this deeper way of understanding, this deeper navigating. In the case of the Hawaiian navigators, it's navigating the oceans. But in the case of Zen students and many others, it's navigating life. And it's absolutely essential for moving forward in our Zen practice. So I leave you with that understanding. This is very short, but it's a very important thing to share with you on this first day of Sesshin. Traditionally, we would read Hakuin's exhortations, Rohatsu exhortations. Every day, he said something. It was just a short thing, usually. And always on the first day, he talked about the specifics of practice. Sitting down on a cushion that's the right height, and focusing on your hara, and allowing your attention to be in your body and sink. And he talked about a couple of different breath practices. They all round up into the Susokan, the extended out breath practice. But if you go to earlier Rohatsu Teishyos, you'll get the specifics on that. It didn't seem necessary to do it this time because there is this very, very well put modern instruction on how to do it. So I thank you for listening. I'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.